Well, hello, Get Hired group. It's Jewel here. So glad to have you with me. If you can see me and hear me okay, give me some likes, give me some love so that I know that I am coming through loud and clear. We are talking tonight about all things resume related. And specifically, I'm going to go over with you 3 ways that you can get more responses to your resume. By the way, if you have questions, if you have concerns about your particular resume, you can go ahead and drop your question right there in the comments. So if you're job searching right now, you can go ahead and say something to me in the comments about that. I'm going to be looking at comments on my other device and I'll be able to see questions as they come in. So, why are we talking about how to get more responses on your resume? Truthfully, this is the number one complaint that I hear from people, which is something along the lines of, Jewel, I've been putting my resume out there for X amount of weeks, X amount of months, and nothing is happening. And typically, this complaint happens when you know you meet all the qualifications in the job. So it's like, what's going on? Because you can do that particular job that's advertised that you're seeing that you're responding to pretty much with your hands tied behind your back. So, what is happening? Why aren't you getting responses? Let's go ahead and talk about that. And towards the end of this live stream, I'm going to open things up to Q&A. So if you have a question about your resume, about your job search, I'm going to save a few minutes towards the end so that I can address those questions and concerns, and we can certainly talk about that. Let's go ahead and get into this. 3 ways that you can increase the responses on your resume. And I'm also going to give you some demonstration. The first thing that I want you to do to increase the response on your resume is make sure that you have the correct keywords. Now, correct is an area where it's a little bit easy to fall down on the job because, how do you know what the correct keywords are? Well, the first thing that you're going to do is start with the ad for the job that you're looking at. Now, that ad will say a whole lot of things. Here's the mistake that I see people tend to make. What happens is pretty much every ad says you need to be detail oriented, a multitasker, thrive in a fast paced environment, things like that. And then what I see when people come to me with their, the before version of their resume, before I do it for them, before I give them the professional makeover, what I see is a resume that starts off with all of these things about how you can multitask, all of these things about how you're detail oriented, and everything about how you can thrive in a fast paced environment. So, the first thing I want you to do to get more responses to your resume is get rid of that language. And there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, no one says those things in real life. You've never been out to dinner. You've never been to a Friday night happy hour where it was the end of the week. You were just kind of letting out off steam, talking about work. And one of the things you said was, I really thrive in a fast paced environment. They recognize me today for being detail oriented. I got complimented today for multitasking. That's not a normal thing that you sit there and say. If you're sitting there just talking about your workday, you might say, man, I really got this big difficult sale. The customer was a little bit rude, but it turned out to be 1.2 million. I had been working it for 6 months and today it finally came through. You talk about real things. Since you talk about real things in a real regular conversation, then I want you to talk about real things on your resume. Multitasking and being detail oriented is not a real thing. So let me show you exactly what we are going to do. So I'm going to share my screen and we are going to talk about how to find the keywords that you're going to need. Now, you're going to start with an ad. So I pulled one up. Let's say that you want to be a sales director and you want to go for this job. So sales director, consumer markets, and then I'm going to scroll down a little bit so that we can read the entire thing. Okay. What you want to do is copy everything about this job, starting with the responsibility. So we're going to start here, copy all of this down to preferred knowledge and skills. Demonstrated selling effectiveness evidenced by the ability to do everything on this list. Demonstrated personal effectiveness, including a proven ability to do everything on this list. And then we're going to end it there. You don't really need the EEOC information or anything like that. And then what I want you to do is hop on over to a handy little website, and that website is called wordedoutcom. So let me show you what we're going to do with Word It Out. And let me first make sure that Word It Out is up here on my screen. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click Create. And you see how I just copied that ad, right? I'm going to paste it where it says original text. And then I'm going to click generate. And I'm actually going to click regenerate because I'm not feeling the cursive. I don't even feel, okay, this is better. If you need to regenerate like I just did, sometimes Word It Out gives us some funky little fonts that I truly do not care for and can't really use. And so what you just need to do is click regenerate. And, you know, if it gives you the puffy 70s font, just regenerate it again. The words don't change. So here is a rendering that we can work with. Now, the job that we're going for in this example is sales director. What you want to do with Word It Out is you want to put together 2-word keyword phrases that have to do with sales. So for example, well, I just thought of a 3-word phrase. I can say sales team leadership. I can say client relationship management. I can say sales strategy. I see sales and I see strategy there. What else can we say? Relationship management. I see that. Sales experience. I see that. So when we put together 2-word keyword phrases, these are going to be the correct terms to put in your resume. Notice on this entire screen, it doesn't say multi anywhere. It doesn't say tasking anywhere. It doesn't say detail or oriented anywhere. So use these tools to really help you determine what are the real keywords and separate those from the imitation keywords. This is going to be essential to you getting more responses to your resume. Now, where are we going to put these keywords on the resume? Let's go ahead and talk about that. So I'm going to flip on over to a sample resume that I have, and I believe it is this one. No, it's this one. Okay. So the keywords, put them in a nice bulleted list, and you want to put them pretty much front and center. So in Cheryl's case, what we do, she's a senior enterprise sales executive, and what we're starting off with are going to be her, it will be her profile. So we're talking about what it is that she brings to the table in the first place. She's offering 20 years of corporate leadership success. And then the rest of it, I'll talk about that in a second. But the point of this part of the discussion primarily has to do with what are the key words, which I've highlighted here, and I'll actually put them in yellow highlights so that we can talk about them a little bit more. Complex and strategic sales, client services, enterprise account management. See, these are hardcore keywords. As a matter of fact, there's a nice litmus test that I like to use. When you're thinking about what your keywords are, ask yourself the following. What is the employer, the prospective employer, going to give me a paycheck to do every 2 weeks? What is he really paying me to do every 2 weeks? Well, in Cheryl's case, he's paying her to conduct complex and strategic sales. He's paying her to conduct client services. Do you see how the employer would not really be paying you to be multitasking? They're not really giving you a paycheck every 2 weeks to be detail oriented. They're paying you to do what is core to the job. So in Cheryl's case, enterprise account management, B2B sales, outsourcing, national account management, all of these elements are core to the job. So that's going to be point number 1 that you absolutely must do when it comes to drawing more responses to your resume. We're going to go ahead and stick with this example because the next thing that I want to talk about is the profile. Now, the mistake is putting a whole lot of flowery language into your profile that ends up not saying a whole heck of a lot. And what I really believe in doing is making sure that you can um, offer up language right from the beginning of the resume that talks about exactly what you can come in and do. And so when we're talking about a profile, it really is your commercial. It's what's going to capture the reader's attention within those first few seconds. So in Cheryl's case, senior enterprise sales exec offering 20 years of corporate leadership success. Great. And then we want to say what she actually does. So this can be a little bit of a challenge because what's challenging is getting away from the flowery language. And I am a person with a bias toward kind of getting down to the fact of the matter, right? I don't do a lot of flowery stuff, so I don't encourage you to do that either. We don't need a profile that's twice as long as this, but says a bunch of nothing. So her next sentence is experience collaborating with C, ugh, be great if I could read what I wrote. Experience collaborating with C-level executives to accelerate business growth and increase revenue. That is at the core what she does. She partners with the C-level decision makers. She's driving business growth. She's driving revenue. It's so important when it comes to getting responses to your resume to make sure to say what you actually do. Okay, if that makes sense to you, you can go ahead and give me some likes and loves in the comments. And while I'm talking, remember that if you have a question, I'm going to go ahead and open things up to questions and concerns about your resume towards the end of the live stream. I can see the questions coming in, so go ahead and post them right here in the comments, and I will be sure to answer. Okay, so in order to make sure you get more responses to your resume, it's critically important to say what you actually do. Now, I'm talking about in the first or the second line. I'm not talking about way down. So, some of the mistakes that I tend to see, I see a profile at the bottom of the resume for some mystery reason. I see skills or expertise, what I have highlighted in yellow, also at the bottom of the resume for some mystery reason. Nobody wants to go, no prospective employer, no HR person is going to the end of page 2 to finally figure out what skills you have. What's critically important in order to make the prospective employer kind of stand up and say, hey, this is the person we want to call, is you're telling the prospective employer within those first 5 seconds, hey, this is what I do. Hey, this is my expertise, and this is hard hitting stuff. Let's go ahead and talk about the third point that you're going to want to include in your resume in order to get more responses. That has to do with your achievements. Now, what I've heard that tends to be not exactly correct is that, oh, well, my achievements speak for themselves. That's not really true. Um, One thing that I like to impress upon my clients when I do their resumes, when I'm listening to their story and translating the story onto the piece of paper, onto the digital platform, one of the things that I really like to emphasize is that people can only read your resume, they can't read your mind. So, no, the work, the words, the work that you're talking about, it doesn't speak for itself. You need to tell the story. The onus is on you to tell the story. The burden's not on the reader to figure out what it is you bring to the table. So let's talk about a couple of achievements here. So, what you want to do, bring some numbers into this thing. You want to make sure that the achievements are quantifiable. Cheryl raised OEM enterprise annuity business 30%, bringing total value through new offers to $46 million. That's very hard hitting. She raised something 30%, 46 million. Great. What else do we have here? I'll go ahead and highlight this in blue. Planned and implemented workplace solution valued at 25 million to support full outsource to BlackBerry. Wonderful. Anything that you can attach money to is fantastic. Let's break down this achievement. Confirmed and architected strategic and executive mapping for AT&T and Cisco, delivering 27% growth. Now, your achievement can be presented in a couple of parts using a couple of key components that I'll go over here. So, number one is the actual percentage or the actual dollar value that you want to talk about. Okay, that's great. One thing that I want to make sure that you do is always provide the context. What did you do in order to make this particular achievement happen? And so, what can occur is you may get too caught up in the numbers and the percentages, right? And everything might be 27% this, $1.2 million that, and you can have, 20 achievements that say some version of that. What I want to encourage you to do in order to get more responses to your resume, this is going to be strategy number 3. I want to encourage you to contextualize those numbers. How did you get there? Because if you give too many numbers, hey, it may seem great. Oh my goodness, I was able to raise revenue X percent. I was able to increase operational efficiency X percent. I was able to cut the budget by X percent. All right. Too many numbers without context really tend to lose their meaning. We don't know how you got there. It just looks like you waved your magic wand, and obviously that's not possible. But what I want to encourage you to do is tell the story and give the context about how you arrived upon those numbers. And here's why. We remember stories. Our human brains are wired to remember stories. We like stories. We still think about the same stories that we heard when we were 5 years old because we remember them. Well, let's apply that concept to the resume. At a future moment, I'll talk to you about applying that concept to your interview as well. You always want to speak in terms of story, whether that's on the piece of paper, whether that is in the digital realm, wherever your digital presence is online, whether that's in the interview when you're human being to human being, even if it's on Zoom or whatever the case is. You always want to speak in terms of story. So, how did Cheryl deliver 27% growth? She confirmed and architected strategic and executive mapping for AT&T and Cisco systems. I mean, that's the answer. Now, Cheryl is speaking to her audience. Her audience knows what this is all about. So a layperson or someone who's not in this field won't necessarily know what that's about, but that's okay because your resume is not a scenario in which you're speaking to many, but you're not speaking to everybody because you're only speaking to your audience. Your audience is only in that industry. So her industry is telecom sales, technology sales. They understand what this is all about. She's speaking their language. She's using the industry buzzwords, and that's exactly what she's supposed to be doing. So if you're not in that industry, you don't need to be necessarily concerned about it. But when you are presenting your achievements, you want to make sure to contextualize them. So the first thing you want to do is have that number, that percentage, that dollar figure, that increase in efficiency, that decrease in the budget, that decrease in time. So a lot of times what I'll see on a resume is someone will say that they were able to bring in a project early and under budget. Well, let's break that down for a second. How much early? Because are we talking, let's say it's a construction project. Well, did you bring that thing in one day early, which is okay, great. One day early is pretty much on time. Or did you bring it in 3 months early? 90 days is a big deal when you're talking about construction. So when you're thinking of numbers, everything doesn't have to be money. There can be time as well. If you're talking about bringing in a project under budget, then talk about the percentage under budget that you're referring to. because, 1% under budget, well, 1% under budget, you probably wouldn't even quantify, but did you bring that thing in 10% under budget? And then how did you do that? You have to give the context. The last thing that I'll say about context that's important is that when you're telling the story, okay, whether that's on the resume, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's in the interview, when you're giving that story, the person who's on the receiving end of that story can start to visualize you in action. And that is so critically important when it comes to getting more responses to your resume. You need to illustrate yourself in action. A big mistake I see is when the resume is flat, it's boring, it talks about the job. And who cares? We don't care about the job. We care about your performance in the job. Big, big difference. So if I have a salesperson's resume next to another salesperson, next to another salesperson, and two of them are describing the job of sales, which is develop new business among targeted accounts, expand a newly designated territory. Some of the things that it may say in the job description, cultivate relationships at the C level. These are some of the things it may say in the job description. Conduct account management. If two resumes are reflective of the job and the job description, but one resume says, hey, generated $27 million in new revenue in 1 year by identifying and capitalizing on a new relationship with a new distributor in the United States. Well, that's a story that contextualizes that achievement. And that's going to be something that gets you more responses to your resume. Okay. So, the three ways to get more responses to your resume: number one, put in the correct keywords. That's critically important. Number two, make sure to say in the first two lines what you can actually come in and actually do for the prospective employer. And number three, present achievements that are quantifiable with some dollar, with some percentage, with some element of time, with some number, and contextualize those achievements. Those are going to be three keys to you getting more resume responses. Now, I review resumes individually, and I'm happy to take a look at yours. If you want a resume review, you can go ahead and type resume review in the comments. If you are catching me on a replay and you have questions about what I'm talking about here in this live stream, or if you have questions about your resume or your particular situation, go ahead and drop your questions here. I'm going to release the replay tomorrow morning, and I'm happy to answer your questions. If you want the resume review, that's a 15-minute chat with me, and that is free. We'll go over, kind of what's wrong with your resume, where we have some opportunities to improve it, and definitely your strategy for improving it. I'll walk you right through that. You can go ahead and put resume review at the bottom of the screen. I'll go ahead and see you in the group, friends. You can continue to ask me questions, and I will see you on the other side.